Welcome to Thriving in the Digital Age, your go-to guide for navigating the ever-changing world of business, technology, and innovation. With your host, Joe Crist, a seasoned entrepreneur and tech enthusiast, here to connect you with the leaders shaping our future. Discover the secrets to thriving in the digital age. Each week, we'll dive into practical insights, cutting-edge strategies, and the latest trends to help your business not just survive, but truly thrive in today's digital world.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Thriving in the Digital Age. I'm your host, Joe Crist, and joining me today is Jason Vego. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm Jason. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Bevz, and we help liquor stores and convenience stores manage their inventory and grow their business. A little bit about me is I spent my career more on the marketing and operations side. I used to work in big tech, a company called Citrix. It was about 10,000 employees across 44 countries. Did marketing and operations. I went and got my MBA from UCLA Anderson, and I was starting a different company at the time that was software for dog groomers. So I'll talk a lot more about what I'm working on at Bevz today. But my first stab at true entrepreneurship was software for dog groomers. That didn't pan out as I'd like, but I learned a lot from it. Took a lot of those learnings and then built Bevz, which is, as I mentioned, software for convenience stores. Really what we're doing today is helping them manage and track their inventory and then boost their sales across online channels. So think Yelp, Google, Facebook, DoorDash, Uber, Grubhub, their own website, things like that.
Wow, that's a pretty impressive background. So Bevz is a platform that is really to help convenience stores operate effectively. It's an interesting thing too. It's not something a lot of us think about, but it makes me think of how many convenience stores I guess you see every day. Whether you live in a big city or a small town, they're almost around every single corner, right? That's a lot of inventory. That's a lot of information. That's a lot of challenges that's being dealt with. In the US alone, it's nationwide, right? So what challenges are you seeing out there that convenience stores are really dealing with?
Yeah. So many challenges. So there are 150,000 convenience stores across the US. There are different regulatory needs and requirements in different states. That is for the buying and selling of alcohol, especially, and tobacco, but even separately, the selling of delivery versus shipping and all of those pieces. So really, we're focused on the independently operated and small chain convenience stores, which dominate the market. So of the 150,000, about 110,000 are independently operated or small chains. So it's a really, really disaggregated industry. So off bat, very challenging. There used to be opportunities to sort of like buy in bulk as multi-stores would sort of team up to compete against the big box chains. That became illegal federally. So most stores can't do that either. And so to answer your question, like what's challenging, so many things, I think, but the ones that really stand out for me is it's a retailer who's been overlooked and sort of underrepresented. It's such a disaggregated industry. And we're all seeing this now, like AI tools are really hot. Well, to even like be able to embrace AI in the first place, these stores really need to have a better grasp on what items do they have in stock, what comes in, what leaves. They need to be comfortable using technology, which they have historically not had to do, right? Like 10 years ago, a convenience store never sold online, right? E-commerce existed, but it was not legal, or it was legal, but so challenging to sell online. And so I think the big challenge for our customer, like the independently owned business owner, is a typical store has 5 to 10,000 unique SKUs in a small mom and pop liquor convenience store. They now have customers that want all sorts of different specific items, right? And they need to go digital to stay alive, but they don't have the tools, the people, the learnings to do that. And that is why we built Bevz, really, which is to help an audience that doesn't have the tools or the resources and take a really custom built tool and help them succeed.
You brought up something that I've seen a lot across multiple industries, right? When it comes to the adoption of tools, it's the knowledge to do it. I've met a lot of people, even people who are pretty digitally native, that are still struggling to adopt newer and newer tools, right? Because there is a growing complexity of what's being asked of them, but it's also it's very difficult to train. I mean, is that something you're seeing too with Bevz, where is there like, I guess, what's the adoption like for a new user?
Yeah, it's rough, right? So in the early days of Bevz, we launched in 2020. We were a little bit different of a company at the time, but for purposes of this conversation, I won't go in depth. But to get these stores to embrace technology at all, we literally went door to door. That was it, right? Like they would not buy software technology on the internet. They would not buy it over the phone. Now they do a little bit more, but we would go door to door and have to physically in person convince them to even embrace software. And at the time, we were giving Bevz away for free. It was only a revenue share program. So it's like, we're giving you a free iPad, free software, and all that will happen is if you make money, we're going to take a percentage of it, right? And even back then, that was a hard push for this audience because at the time, even today, like 90% plus of what these stores sell is still in person. It's going in that direction. But when you're 5 years ago, 97% of your sales are in person, you're going, I don't need to embrace digital, right? So the adoption is low. What's interesting for our business has its opportunities and challenges is we don't see a ton of competition. So it's not like there are a ton of software for liquor stores and convenience stores. I always get this question from like investors or other founders or CEOs, and it's usually that's the case. Like you got to beat out the competition. Our competition is typically the store not doing anything digital at all. So I'd say in our market, adoption of technology is insanely low. We're lucky if a store just has a point of sale system instead of a cash box, right? So we're really sort of far behind. Once we get a store using Bevz, so once they have the software, it's pretty consistent because most of these stores are getting some form of e-commerce or delivery order on a daily basis. So that was really the spark that sort of got this rolling was you're a retailer, you've never had to use tech, we get you set up. Once you start seeing money come in that you didn't get before, you start to go, okay, that's interesting. And that's when we started to really see sort of past the chasm was like they were getting e-commerce orders they were not getting before. That triggered them to start maybe tracking their inventory a little better, thinking more thoughtfully about pricing and all of that. But I would say like as an industry, the whole broader alcohol and snack industry, all the way down to the retailer is still insanely low adoption. And that's sort of what we're most excited about, though it's been a challenge, is to be the sort of the trigger to get this industry to embrace digital.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Obviously, once companies do, like whether you're, selling snacks and alcohol or you're selling brooms, right? There's always this hesitation of like, this may be a scam or this may not work or hey, it's not for me. But a lot of the challenge I see, it's because people can't imagine what their future would look like, right? And it's really hard to, get someone to embrace something when they can't see is like, hey, or they can't see the possibility of what could be.
Yeah.
Right. So
No,
digitization brought to us, it's just like, hey, we can make a digital version of your business and we can reach a lot more people a lot faster.
yeah, that combo is really hard for us. So in our industry, especially, they've been screwed over with stuff all the time. Crypto ATMs, or so often, even today, you get these big alcohol distributors going like, if you want to buy these types of liquor, let's say like a Tito's that you got to have in your store, you also need to buy these like this new brand that's so hot and it's selling so well. Like if you remember when hard seltzers launched, like there was a point where stores were pressured to have like fridges full of hard seltzer. Think like they may only have 10 fridge doors. You're going to make 3 of them hard seltzers. And so they've been screwed over so often. So when we came to them, even though it's like we were co-founded by liquor and convenience store owners, it was like, how do we trust you? Everyone has always told me this thing will sell or this will be great. So like that was a barrier and still is even today. But then even like to your point of like, how do they even envision what is possible? It's one of the biggest challenges we have today from like a product standpoint. In a perfect world, I ask my customer, what do they want and need? What are their biggest challenges? Similar questions to you're asking me. And then they tell me, and we build product features to help. They are struggling to articulate anything beyond make more money online, right? Of course, they want to make more sales online, but all we hear from them is give me more delivery apps and I want to sell more on those delivery apps. And we're like, we will do that. That is part of our business model. But outside of just making more money, like what does your business really need? it's hard because they can't totally visualize like what that even looks like. And so we're trying to make some guesses, which we do, still interview our customers. And we've thrown a few things out there over the years that did not stick, but I think that's just kind of the name of the game to try and land the right piece.
Yeah, it's a really big challenge when it comes to adoption of technologies, right? Is like really getting on the same page. And it sounds like you've been working with a lot of different vendors out there to really like help them like understand like you're not just stuck to these little things. It's scary to be first, but nobody wants to be last. So like what solutions are out there that, like obviously what you guys are doing with Bevz to actually really help these stores move faster and really enter the digital age?
Yeah, so I think obviously for my industry specifically, I am going to say you should get tools like Bevz. Additionally, if you're in retail, I think it's worth the investment in a good point of sale system. So today, for example, in our realm, we integrate with a few really good point of sale systems. If you can pair very good hardware with very good software, like it's more often available than retailers think. And me being what we call vertical software, we're like very specific. We've studied a lot of other verticals. If you're clothing retail, your food, your beverage, look for tools that are specific to you. 99% of the time we see a retailer, whether it's in my industry or not, and they're using something generic, right? Not to talk negatively on like Square, which I actually think is a great solution, but everyone defaults to the one they've heard of. Just get Square, everyone uses it. If I'm a coffee shop, there are coffee shop specific software and hardware to use. So my first recommendation would be like anyone owning a business or selling to a business. Like I'm a huge believer in vertical, which is like get very specific. And there are so many very specific tools like built for you and your industry that will be a million times easier. So that would be sort of one. I think the second is I'm further behind in AI than I would like personally, but we're starting to look into it for our own customers. There's so much automation that exists out there. It's crazy, right? And so it all depends differently, right? Like, so our customer, for example, does not need an AI sales agent, right? 95% of the traffic goes into the store, but there are other businesses, maybe accounting firms or other small businesses that you can use these AI agents that will, and you polish it, right? You will polish the language, the usage, et cetera. But like they can literally scour the internet, send messages, identify customers, set up meetings for you. And so I challenge people in their industry to combine those two, look for vertical specific technology to help with automation. The third thing I'd say would be a huge believer for me is around the data and the infrastructure you do without any technology, right? So even at Bevz today, right? Like we didn't use a CRM many years ago. We didn't have a tool like HubSpot or Salesforce or anything like that. I thought we could get away with sort of running it through Google Sheets. And then we fast forward to today, HubSpot would probably be the last thing I get rid of. I think it would be the literal, if Bevz was going to go out of business, HubSpot would be the very last thing I would have to get rid of because it's so critical. And I just think we talked about this earlier, right? Like capturing the data and having it well organized is what goes into any software or hardware you use. Because if you're all over the map, like get the best point of sale system ever in existence, give it to a convenience store or liquor store. If they're not tracking their inventory, it doesn't matter. They just have a really shiny piece of hardware. And so I'd say those are my three. And if we talk about the same topic in a year from now, I think it's going to be dramatically different, which is fascinating and scary.
Yeah, so you brought up something interesting too when it comes to adoption technology and verticals, right? I've seen it too across all different industries where everybody picks what they know. They pick what they're comfortable with, pick what they've used. So I think a lot of the challenge that comes from that, and I mean, if you something different, I'd love to hear it. It's a lot of companies don't really advertise the very specific ones like, hey, we do this and this is all we do for this exact industry and this type of business. They don't advertise nearly as well as the general ones. Like, right, you brought up Google Sheets, right? Like even Microsoft Excel, for example. Everybody's got Excel, right? I can put numbers on there. I've used Excel as a CRM myself before I upgraded, because also it was free.
I still use Excel a lot, right? a lot.
And I think that's a challenge too. I imagine, or at least I imagine this, right? Where it's a lot of companies that I think they would love to have this like hyper specific, this is for what we do. I feel like a lot of companies feel like they don't even need it though. Right. I think they do personally. It's like, hey, this is going to help you optimize because it is tailored to your work. It is the not best tool for the job, the right tool for the job, right? Compared to what they're doing now. But I see them just thinking it's like, oh no, we don't need that. We don't need that. We have this, right? And it's trying to like get them a little more fine tuned to like, hey, this never the goal. The goal should never be find the best tool for the job. It's find the right tool for the job.
100%. I think the key word there that you said is need. And I agree. Like even Bevz software today, a convenience store does not need Bevz today. But I would argue exactly what you said is you should be looking at what will make you great, not what you need. And secondly, those are the exact things you will need in 5 to 10 years. I'm positive, or I believe positively, that in 5 to 10 years, if these convenience stores and liquor stores don't automate or digitize anything, they will do just as well basically for like a few more years. And 10 years from now, those will all go out of business or get bought out and they will not exist anymore. And so it's such a tricky thing because like we're a venture-backed startup, right? And we're selling this giant problem with incredible solution, right? Like that's the vision. But a lot of these stores are just going like, I don't need that. And I agree, you don't need it right now, but you better change that mindset and get ahead of what you will need. Otherwise, you want to have a store and it happens so fast, like they will blink their eyes and not be able to sort of adapt. And I'll give you actually a really interesting example. It's happening in LA right now, all over the US, but especially like in an area like Santa Monica, which is a pretty high-end neighborhood in Los Angeles, right? It's even happening there, which is a lot of the big distributors, say like Anheuser-Busch, Miller Coors, like big beer distributors, would go every single week to the store. They'd go every week. They would count the inventory for them, say, hey, you're low on this. You have a lot of this. You should buy more of this. And maybe like, here's one new product we just launched. Well, the stores love that, obviously. Well, in pretty much a snap of the fingers in Santa Monica, a bunch of locations, these big beer companies just said, they're just not worth visiting every week anymore. Stop visiting them. And then the store owners are going, well, I don't have a system to track my inventory. And then the brands are going, order online. We now have online ordering tool. They're not equipped. They don't know what they have in stock. They don't know what to buy. And like in a snap of a fingers, all it takes is one of these like bigger players in the broader industry. They're going digital, right? You think like Anheuser-Busch isn't spending money on going more digital? Of course they are. And so I just think not only just like the general trajectory of digital and tech, it's like in a snap of a fingers, one sort of adaptation and your store's not positioned to exist at all. And I think that's going to happen in a lot of other sectors too, that the big players just change their mind on how they want to do stuff. And it affects the small people the most.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen, right? Because these companies are trying to advance and move faster too, right? Because every company is trying to control costs. It doesn't matter how big you are, right? And you also brought another interesting point about like, having like better managed data. And that's the thing too. If you can't manage your data, if you don't know your inventory, when things go wrong because you don't have that visibility, they're going to go very wrong, right? And it's going to be a lot harder because you're going to have essentially all this technical debt, for lack of a better word, of we don't know we don't have our inventory. You're going to do what some bars do where they order too much and they have way too many things in the back. They either don't have storage or they got to sell it off, or things, it's don't work out, or they don't have enough, right? And they cap out of inventory, and it's just like, well, people can't get what they want, right? And there are a few things worse than having an unhappy customer in a business.
Yeah, and
that's
the heart of it.
Yeah, and really creating that visibility, right? Having that good data, having that good system in place. And when I say system, I don't just mean technology. It's a combination of people, process, and technology.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, when you have that in place, it really does help you like not just have control, but have safety. It's like, hey, you're aware how much we have. We know how much we're selling. We're able to predict now. We're using predictive analytics to say, on the seasonality of these drinks, we need to start ordering more or we need to start pulling back. And it's going to help control costs. It's going to help manage risk. It's going to help keep customers happy. It's a guaranteed win. But the challenge though, it's adoption. A lot of companies say, hey, we we don't need this yet. I'm like, but you're going to, and you do not want to be less.
No. And I think what's really cool is we're at this like really big turning point, I feel like, where almost anything's possible. It's still just quite expensive, especially in our space, right? Like today, if I wanted to, I could put cameras in the store and I could track live inventory via image technology, right? For sure. I've met some great companies doing it. Each camera costs more than the entire software platform that I charge to the retailer, right? So it's not possible, right? That is getting cheaper. Another thing we're really looking to do is like tapping into the POS, whether that be full integration, whether that be eventually having our own point of sale, or we have this UPC tracking technology, which is like, can we plug in and just start to do basic math? What comes in, what leaves? But unsurprisingly, tracking hundreds of thousands of UPC codes and SKUs and matching them and the way different distributors and suppliers label them, like we're getting to a place where that will become cheap enough where any retailer could get a technology like Bevz. Again, our longer term vision is really nail this vertical. And if we could do it in alcohol, tobacco, like in spaces that are highly regulated, we know we could go to clothing or easier things. And it does it for you, right? It goes, hey, we looked at your neighborhood and what you bought last year and what you sold this year and what you're selling right this second. And like, don't buy more hard seltzer, like cut that down by 20% and invest in like non-alcoholic beers, for example, which are growing really fast. So it's even though our customer today at Bevz is the retailer, I see like the big play, or what like gets me like extremely excited at Bevz is it's a customer that's full of localized, like hyper local data on what people are buying and selling. And that's been this huge gap, which is it shouldn't be that crazy to go, I want an item, any item, snack, drink, chips, healthy, unhealthy, whatever, you're the boss of your own life, and be able to find where it is and then either go pick it up or get it delivered. It's not that crazy. And so to me, like the data is going to be fascinating, that we believe by going bottoms up, hitting the independents and really hitting like local markets, like we hope one day is to give the software away for free to the retailer where the business doesn't have to pay anything. And the big brands are the ones who sort of tap into the data to, again, still make a better experience, right? Like the brands don't want to sell items that the stores don't sell either. Nobody wins if you're Anheuser-Busch and you sell beers that nobody wants to a retailer that they don't sell it to. So we're excited about the data for sure.
Yeah. That kind of segues to the next question, right? Because obviously I can see that there's mass potential behind this, right? Where it could really change the way this industry works. An industry that desperately needs help. So what does the future look like, right? Like say like a future with Bevz and a future without it. Like where would it really differ?
Yeah, I see a few things, and I'll keep it more general, not just to Bevz, but to like where I see retail going, I think, right? So one is I think other people are building tools similar to Bevz. So whatever retail you're in, I think customization and specification is going to keep going in the same direction. Again, meaning maybe 40 years ago, someone wanted beer or wanted wine, or, wine's obviously a bigger sector, but like, let's take beer. Then now it's light beer, dark beers. Now it's IPAs, and there's hundreds and thousands of different IPAs. Now it's hazy IPAs. And so people want very specific items, meaning I think retailers are going to have to be responsible for and have a mechanism to get a lot of different types of items. Like I love the In-N-Outs of the world that sort of nailed this. We do a few things really, really well. But I think generally speaking, the world is going in a direction where they want more specifics. Amazon, things like that. So I think part one is that. So in my world, that means convenience stores and liquor stores need to be prepared to not just have 5,000 SKUs, but 7,000, 8,000, 10,000, which means you're going to have very few of them. I think two, tracking technology is getting really, really good. So like what we're trying to build is we're not building rockets. We're literally as a world, sending rockets into space. We are getting very close, which should have happened a long time ago, to having very specific, easy to use systems where a retailer, whatever they are buying and selling, any form of good, service is obviously a little easier to track, but any form of physical good should be able to automatically track what comes in, what leaves, automate the sort of replenishment. I think the third, especially like the TikTok generation, whether TikTok stays how it is or ends up getting banned, But I think the essence of it is what's really key, which is I think live online shopping and personalized experiences is going to get huge. And so where I see things happening is whether you have physical or digital retail, I see a lot of these companies having the stuff they're spending all their time on, buying inventory, tracking it, seeing what they have in stock, replenishing shelves. Like that's going to be all automated, maybe with some robotics, maybe with not, but at least with the data, automating it, right? And then they can spend their time on the experience with the customers. And I don't think it's going to be well polished advertising and things like that, especially for a small business who you mentioned earlier, like, don't have the budgets to advertise that way. And it's going to be building communities, selling things directly, and connecting in a more personal way, digitally and physically. And that's really where I see it. Like I'll finish off with sort of like the picture of one of our stores, a mom and pop store in the middle of Texas. I see never having to really order inventory. They put 90% of it automatic. The moment it hits 10% threshold, it auto reorders, shows up at their store, ready to go and sell, right? Then they're spending their time talking to customers in the store, doing live videos, saying they got a specialty whiskey bottle, first come, first serve, whoever sort of gets it. And so I do see that coming. And we're still very behind in our sector, but I see a really cool future of more personalized, engaged experiences with retailers once they can get the operations automated.
You know, you brought up something really interesting too that I was thinking about. So a lot of people think digital age, right? They envision software, like, digital products, digital whatever, like easy to access, right? But we still exist in the physical world. And there's the whole concept of a cyber physical world, right? Where there's overlap. And this is what this is too, right? Where you have these companies or they like these small mom and pop stores that don't really have much experience or knowledge into supply chain management, right? Where their supply is their lifeline to their customer, right? That's really how they help their customers, how they drive value. And when you can actually have that visibility and do it, and you can start to personalize what people really want, it's a huge win for everybody, right? Huge win for the company. It's a huge, win for the distributors. It's a huge win for the customer because everybody is now getting what they want, and we can be even more fine tuned and create that experience that people want. But it's just one of those things that you don't typically think about, but it's a very, very real need.
Yeah. And especially like post-pandemic, you think we sort of went hyper digital and now we're like going into a new realm where everyone's craving in person. And now it's how do we blend these like digitally backed and supported physical opportunities? What I love about my world is like, I don't care how digital you want to be. If you want to drink a beer, you have to physically have that beer.
Yeah.
And will it maybe one day get droned to your house? Like possibly. But even with the most advanced automated drone that could fly into a liquor store and grab your beer, it needs to know what's there. And so the stores are going to get there. And I just think like, I'll give one example when you were talking about sort of what you just said, which is there's a store in LA called Valley Beverage Co. And like everyone knows they have this crazy craft beer selection and tequila selection. But the craft beer especially, it's these two long fridges where 16-ounce cans, they're all different. I mean, like hundreds of different 16-ounce from all over the US and the world that you can't get anywhere, right? And so even today, that was a hard store for us to try and help because that's a level of SKUs in just one fridge. That's insane. But that store does so well in LA and everyone knows that they're the place to get these types of things. And I just see that happening across all retail and being able to really physically experience it. Like even if I could get that guy over there to just FaceTime his fridge for me, that'd be really cool. But we're not that far off where we can get to a place where you can sort of almost like virtually walk through places, experience them, but it's such a funky balance with everyone wanting human interaction. So anyways, a little bit of a tangent, but I'm excited yet nervous yet curious on what retail really looks like, but things are getting cheaper and easier. So hopefully in the right direction.
Yeah. And I can definitely see this movement now, like legitization of like this industry, right? When you're dealing with beverages and you're dealing with just convenience stores, you're streamlining things because people care about time. That's the one thing I always like to tell people. It's it's you can always make money, you can always make something more valuable, but you can never make more time, right? And this right here, the amount of time you save where you can really focus on the things that matter to you is amazing, right? It's an incredibly disruptive idea.
Yeah.
Where you're streamlining the experience to go have experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very meta.
Yeah, right. But Jason, I got one more question for you, man. This has been super interesting. So I know you've been around the block, you got a lot of different experiences. If you can give the audience any piece of advice, what would it be?
A lot of thoughts, I think, and I mentioned a few of them today, right? Especially for the business owner. So I'll provide, I think, something a little different, which I think has been said, but I want to double down on it, which is there's a lot of free learning and training out there across a lot of spectrum. So you're talking about AI tools or software that's out there. You can learn what is out there. You can learn how to use that stuff. You can learn answers kind of to the questions you're asking today, like where things are going. I remember a few years ago, I read a book that was like the future of just technology. And it painted these really interesting pictures of people owning less things and more rentals. And like, we're seeing a lot of that happen. And so there's a sort of trifecta of with sites like Coursera, like you can learn really fast for very cheap. I went to get my MBA from UCLA, right? Like that's expensive. You don't have to do that to really embrace the technology. So whether you're a business owner, a consumer, you work in big tech, like these tools are going to be incorporated. And I'm a huge believer in AI, and the tools are not going to take your job. It is the people who know how to use them are going to take your job. And so I think my one biggest piece of advice, and I need to practice what I preach, right? I am literally right now taking an AI course because I'm not fast enough. I'm not keeping up with the times well enough. So I think my one piece of advice would be learn the skills and the tools that are out there. Learning how to use tools takes no background in tech, right? Like I remember years ago, I wanted to do some graphic design. I learned how to use like Adobe Photoshop. It's like, that didn't take any skill. I mean, my art sucked that I created in Photoshop, but like learning the tool itself is a really important skill set. So I'd go there and then just embrace technology, not when you need it, but when you think you will need it in the future is, I think, the biggest theme for me now. And hopefully my retailers or prospective retailers hear that and take that to heart.
Absolutely. No, I love that. All right, everybody. That was Jason Vego. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure the audience did as well. I'm sure they're very thankful too. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on Thriving in the Digital Age. And I hope to see you all next week.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Thriving in the Digital Age. We hope today's episode gave you some great tips for navigating and rocking the digital world. Remember to hit subscribe for more awesome tips, strategies, and expert talks on thriving in the digital age. Stay connected, stay informed, and keep on thriving.